Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Tuesday, June the 9th. And welcome to our commentary. Well, there is a story regarding a helicopter in the Straits of Hormuz. I don't quite understand all the details. I don't know exactly what happened, but apparently an American helicopter was shot on the Straits of Hormuz or flying over the Straits of Hormuz or whatever. Remember that the Straits of Hormuz, this is international waters. This strait does not belong to Iran, even though people say they closed it and opened it. They don't get to close it or open it. I mean, what they do is they put mines in the water, which effectively close it, but it's not because people don't want to have their ships blown up. But they don't get to open it and close it. So they don't get to decide who's in that strait or what ships navigate on that strait or, what helicopters or planes fly over it. So if the story is, as I've heard it so far, that an American helicopter was shot by the Iranians, that's an act of war. I don't think that's very complicated. That's an act of war. An American helicopter, American aircraft, shot over international waters is an act of war. So I don't know how President Trump is going to respond. It's happening right now. So by the time you listen to this or hear this, we may already know what he did. My guess is that there's going to be some kind of response. I think it'll be pretty clear what the response is. This is not going to be, let's go to the UN and have a meeting about this. I think it'll be some kind of a military response, and we'll see. But you don't shoot at American helicopters over international waters without consequences. I'm sorry, you don't. And I think Iran has to be taught a lesson, very clear lesson about that they're not supposed to be engaging in that kind of activity. So we will see what happens. As I say, this is literally developing, and literally President Trump, as I understand, is in meetings right now. This is 2:30 or 2:40 Tuesday afternoon. So we may have some information later today, but some response, very specific response, is necessary in a situation like this. So we'll see. Probably have more to say about this tomorrow. I have a post over at the American Thinker today talking about what is happening in California with their elections. And the title of my post is California Smells Bad. All right. And I want to make it quite clear that I don't have any evidence, or I don't know if it's legal or illegal what they're doing. People are saying that they cheated and that kind of thing. I really don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. It's very, very likely that these are the rules in California, but that doesn't mean that the rules make any sense. They don't make sense. And that's why I say in my post that it smells bad. Because when people have these kinds of situations, when they vote and then when they're counting later, the other guy wins, that kind of thing, it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth, as they like to say. And I think California has to learn from this and figure something out. Look, we in Texas, we know our results by 10 o'clock Central Time. In Florida, the same thing. The idea that it takes California days to count this is ridiculous. I mean, a week. The primary was a week ago. It's ridiculous. I mean, something needs to change. Now, what they tell you is, well, we want to make sure every vote is counted and they're counting manually. Okay, I can see that to a point, but not a week. I mean, there are other states that do mail-in voting too, and somehow they don't have this problem. So I think, again, to me, it's not a question of illegality at this point or cheating. It's simply a question of an image that you create, a bad image that you create when you vote like this or you count votes like this. I think California should have a system where we should know fairly soon when the results are counted. And it shouldn't be waiting this long. For example, I'll just give you a little bit of comparison. Peru, the country in South America, had an election on Sunday. Now, it's an extremely contested election. Something like 96% of the vote, 97% of the vote has been counted. And basically, the only thing left to count in that election in Peru is the vote outside of Peru, because there are obviously Peruvians all over the world who vote through their consulates. And they're supposed to be coming up with a final result here in the next 24 hours. So Peru, a so-called third world country, can have their vote counted by no later than Wednesday. Now, they probably would have had a winner, or at least a projected winner, on Sunday night, but the election is so close that they couldn't project the winner. I mean, literally, the election is like 50.01 to 49.99 or something. I mean, it's almost a tie. It's almost a technical tie. I mean, it's like I saw some numbers, like 18 million votes have been cast, and the election is decided by less than 1,000 votes. So it's an extremely tight election, one of the closest I think we've had in any country. But they've got most of the votes counted, and they should be over by tomorrow. We should know by Wednesday of this week. That's 3 days. Here we are a week later in California, and we still have not officially announced the winners. Now, they've projected some winners, I know, but I just think it looks bad. So whether it's whether it's legal, illegal, cheating, all of that I will leave to other people, because I honestly don't know. But all I can tell you is that it looks really bad in the United States for one state to have this much trouble voting. I just think it looks really bad, and that's what that's what my post is all about today at American Thinker. They need to get their act together out there. They need to fix it, come up with a system where people can vote on election day, and we should have a pretty good idea on election night who's going to win, or at least where 95% of the vote is. You're always going to have a contested election. You're always going to have a close election. And in those cases, sometimes even here in the United States, we have to go to, let's say, the early morning to determine who won or who didn't win. But that's not what's happening out there. I mean, what's happening out there is that they're still like a week after the election, they've only counted, I think, like 70% of the vote. I mean, that's pretty bad. I think that's a bad system. Again, I'm not saying cheating. I'm not saying fraud. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying the system is bad. They need to make it better. They need to make it work better for the citizens of California. Because when you have these little games where, the people vote on election day, and then they start counting later, and then one person who finished in third place all of a sudden moves up to second. Again, it may be totally legal what's happening, but it just makes the whole thing look bad, the whole system look bad. And I think that's an important part of this, your image as a state, to say the least. Well, just a couple of quick things. There is a primary in Maine today, Tuesday, and this is the big primary where this guy running on the Democrat side for the U.S. Senate, very controversial fellow. I don't know if he's going to win. It looks like he will be nominated by the Democrats, which is going to be a blessing for Susan Collins. I mean, they're basically guaranteeing that she's going to win or be reelected. And there's no way the Democrats can get the Senate without Maine. So it's a big deal what happens in this primary today. But once upon a time, the Democrats could somehow, vet their candidates just a little bit better. But how this guy got this far tells you a lot about the state of the Democrat Party. So we'll see what happens today in Maine. But I think they're going to nominate him. But in the process of doing so, they're going to end up reelecting Susan Collins, and she'll go back for another term. Now, one quick thing here about what happened with President Trump over the weekend with NBC Meet the Press. Look, everybody's talking about the confrontation between President Trump and Meet the Press, and I just got a couple of things I want to say about it. Number one, people need to understand that when President Trump beats up on the media, when he attacks the media, when he has arguments with the media, that's a big deal for his base. Because honestly, a lot of the people who voted for Trump, myself included, we have some real doubts about the fairness of the media and how the media treated Trump. I mean, consider things like Russia, the Hunter Biden laptop, and then look at the President Biden. The media didn't want to talk about his condition, even though it was obvious to anybody watching TV that President Biden had a problem. I mean, remember, as I've said before, President Biden is not just an old man in a job. He's the president of the United States in a job where you get to decide whether or not to use nuclear weapons. And that was the biggest fear I had, that, there's a crisis at 4 o'clock in the morning. Is he up to it? So the media covered that up pretty good. Not everybody, but a lot of them did. And then, of course, the situation with Kamala Harris in the campaign, where she got to do an entire campaign without doing a press conference. Well, I'm sorry. You don't get to do that in the United States. You got to have a press conference. But she didn't. And apparently the media didn't care about it. So overall, I think that, the Trump people have a good case that the media has not been fair to them. I think they do. And then beyond that, when you look at polling data like Gallup and Pew Research, who do these studies of the media, well, they keep telling us that confidence in the media is at an all-time low. I wonder why. So, I think the media needs to look at itself in the mirror and say, we got some problems. Our people, the people who watch us, don't trust us. So why don't they? Why don't they trust them? I think that's a conversation they need to have, because right now they're not trusted. And I'm talking large numbers of people who don't have confidence in the media. This is not even a split anymore. This is a good majority of Americans who don't trust the media. And that's a problem, because I think it's very important for a country to have a capable media. I think to me, it's essential for a democracy to have a media that is credible. And right now we don't. And that's about it. They can hate Trump all they want. They can blame it on Trump all they want, but that's not going to take care of the problem. They're the ones with the problem. They've got to look at themselves in the mirror and say, why do people have these attitudes about us? What are we doing to create these attitudes that people have about the media? And they're not doing that. They're just sitting around talking about Trump. Well, okay, you can talk about Trump all you want, but he'll be gone in a couple of years, and you're going to be around. Are you going to have this? Are you going to get your credibility back? Well, that's the question that the media needs to be looking at. Well, thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.